She was 6 months pregnant, lying in bed with a fever of 101, and the man she had loved for 5 years was in the next room, washing only his own clothes. That was the night Naomi decided her marriage was over. You know this feeling. You have felt it before. Maybe not in a laundry room, maybe not in a marriage, but you have felt it. It is the feeling of trying. Genuinely, carefully, quietly trying. And having that trying looked at like it is the problem. It is the feeling of reaching out and being corrected. Of offering and being redirected. Of showing up and being told, in 100 small and perfectly reasonable ways, that showing up like this, the way you show up, is not quite right. So you adjust. You pull back. You wait. You learn the rules of a space that keeps changing its rules. You stop touching the laundry because the last time you touched the laundry it became an argument about settings and labels and the one red sock you missed at the bottom of the hamper. You stop cooking because cooking became a lesson. You stop trying because trying became evidence of everything you were doing wrong. And then one night, the one night it matters most, you do exactly what you were taught to do. You stay back. You give space. You keep the television low and the kitchen clean, and you wash only your own clothes because you are terrified of ruining hers and getting it wrong again. And somehow, that becomes the crime. You didn't fail her that night. You failed a test she never told you she was giving. And she graded you a monster for passing the only exam you knew how to sit. But here is what nobody told Naomi. Here is what Priscilla didn't say. What Diana didn't say. What Franklin, even at that kitchen table, even in his most honest moment, could not bring himself to say out loud. There is a pattern in this story that is older than this marriage. Older than Naomi and Franklin. Older than the apartment, the laundry basket, the fever, the divorce papers. There is something in the way certain people love, the way they grip and correct and perfect and control, that does not begin with them. It is handed down. It is learned in childhood kitchens and childhood silences. It is the inheritance nobody asks for and nobody notices until it has already cost them something they cannot get back. Naomi learned to love the way she was taught to love. And the question that will stay with you long after this video ends, is not whether she was right or wrong. The question is, who taught her? And do you recognize the teacher? Stay with me. Hello, family. Welcome to our channel where incredible, thought-provoking stories about love, life, and the raw truth of human relationships are told. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts and where you are watching from in the comment section below. Because today's story, it is going to make you stop and think. Really think. It was a Tuesday in late October when everything unraveled. Naomi had woken up that morning already feeling wrong. That particular kind of wrong that pregnant women know too well, where your body feels like it borrowed trouble from somewhere and forgot to return it. Her throat was sore. Her joints ached. The kind of cold that wraps around your bones and squeezes. She had dragged herself to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, and made a silent deal with herself. Today I rest. Franklin had already left for work by the time she shuffled back to bed. He was a logistics coordinator for a mid-sized shipping company. Early starts, long hours, the kind of job that demanded reliability even when life at home was complicated. He had kissed her forehead before leaving, noticed she felt warm, and told her to call him if she needed anything. She didn't call. By noon, the laundry basket in the corner of their bedroom had become the enemy. It sat there, overflowing, both of their clothes tangled together, her maternity blouses mixed in with his work shirts, her delicate fabrics piled against his jeans. She stared at it from the bed the way a person stares at a problem they are hoping will solve itself. It didn't solve itself. Franklin came home at 6:30. Naomi heard the front door, heard him set his keys on the counter, heard the shuffle of shoes being removed. She waited. She lay there with her fever and her aching back and the 7-pound human doing somersaults in her belly, and she waited for Franklin to walk through that bedroom door, take one look at her, take one look at that laundry basket, and just know. He knocked softly, peeked in, saw her in bed. "Hey," he said quietly. "Still feeling rough?" "Yeah," she said. He nodded. "I'll let you rest." And he left. 30 minutes later, she heard the washing machine start. She heard it fill with water. She heard it begin its cycle. And something in her chest, something that had been quietly tightening for months, maybe years, snapped like a wire pulled 1 inch too far. She got up. She walked to the laundry room. She stood in the doorway and looked inside the drum of the washing machine. His shirts. His socks. His clothes. Only his. Her basket sat untouched beside the machine. She stood there for a long moment, one hand on the doorframe, one hand resting instinctively on her stomach, and she felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with her fever. She went back to bed. She did not say a word. Franklin made himself dinner, pasta, simple, quick. He ate alone at the kitchen table. He did not bring her a plate. He did not knock on the door again to ask if she was hungry. He cleaned up after himself, watched television for an hour with the volume low, and came to bed well after she had pretended to fall asleep. She lay in the dark beside him, listening to his breathing slow and deepen into sleep, and she made her decision quietly, the way people make the most devastating decisions. Not with thunder, not with screaming, but with a silence so complete it echoes. She was done. The next morning, Franklin left for work and Naomi picked up her phone and called her sister, Diana. Diana was 2 years older, sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal, and the kind of woman who showed up with food, opinions, and zero tolerance for nonsense, in that order. She arrived within the hour, let herself in with her spare key, found Naomi sitting up in bed with red eyes and a jaw set like concrete. "Tell me," Diana said, sitting at the foot of the bed. So Naomi told her. Every word of it. The fever. The laundry. The separate dinner. The silence. She painted it with the kind of precision that only comes from a night spent rehearsing it in your head. Every detail sharp, every beat landing exactly where she intended it to land. By the time she finished, Diana's face had moved through concern, then sympathy, and then something harder to read. "I'm calling a lawyer," Naomi said. "I've already looked some up." Diana was quiet for a moment. "Naomi, don't." Naomi's voice was firm. "Don't defend him. Not this time." "I'm not defending him," Diana said carefully. I want to understand. When he came home and you were sick, did you tell him you needed help with the laundry?" "I shouldn't have to tell him," Naomi said. "He should know." Diana looked at her sister for a long moment. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked down at her hands. And in that pause, that brief, loaded pause, something hung in the air between them that neither woman was quite ready to name yet. But it was there. Naomi had met Franklin 6 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He had been the quiet one at the table, not shy, just measured. The kind of man who listened before he spoke, who laughed with his whole face, who held the door open without making a performance of it. She had found him fascinating in the way that careful, steady people often fascinate those who move through life at full speed. They dated for 11 months before he proposed. Simple ring, simple dinner, completely sincere. She said yes before he finished the sentence. Their first year of marriage had been good. Imperfect, the way all real things are imperfect, but good. They had moved into their apartment, a roomy 2-bedroom in a mid-rise building with creaky elevators and a neighbor who played saxophone badly, but enthusiastically every Sunday morning. They had built their routines, their inside jokes, their corner of the world. But somewhere in that first year, something subtle had begun. It started with laundry. Franklin had done a load one Saturday, gathered the clothes, loaded the machine, added detergent. He had felt good about it, the quiet satisfaction of a task handled without being asked. When Naomi opened the dryer and found her silk blouse wrinkled and slightly shrunken, the feedback had been immediate. "Franklin, I have told you, that these cannot go in the dryer. You have to check the labels." "Did you even look at the labels?" He had apologized. He had meant it. The next time, he sorted more carefully. But he had missed a red sock buried at the bottom of the hamper, and 3 of his white undershirts came out pink. Again, the feedback came, faster this time, sharper. "This is why I said leave the laundry to me. You always rush. You don't pay attention." He had apologized again. He had started to hesitate before touching the laundry basket. It moved to cooking, to cleaning, to the way he stacked dishes, the order in which he vacuumed rooms, the temperature he set on the thermostat. Each correction delivered with the full confidence of someone who simply knew better. Each apology from Franklin received and filed away, not cruelly but completely as confirmation that yes, his way was the wrong way. And so slowly, steadily, across 5 years of marriage, Franklin had learned. He had learned to wait, to ask, to stand back, to let Naomi handle the things Naomi handled best, because every time he tried to help became a problem, and problems became arguments, and arguments became the kind of nights where the silence in a room felt heavier than anything either of them could say. He loved her. He was not passive because he was lazy. He was not distant because he did not care. He was careful because he had been taught, one correction at a time, that careful was the only safe way to love her. And on that Tuesday night in October, when his pregnant wife lay sick in the bedroom and the laundry basket sat full in the corner, Franklin had stood in the laundry room and made what he believed was the right choice. He washed his own clothes because he was terrified of ruining her delicates. He ate alone because the last time she was ill, he had brought her toast and she had snapped that the smell of food made her nauseous. And he had stood there holding the plate, not knowing whether to stay or go. He kept the television low, stayed out of the room, and gave her the space and quiet he genuinely believed she needed. He was not being cruel. He was being the husband 5 years of marriage had shaped him to be. And in the next room, Naomi lay in the dark, watching the ceiling, and decided that his silence was proof he never loved her at all. Diana stayed for 3 hours that morning. She made tea. She reheated soup. She sat in the armchair beside Naomi's bed and listened. Really listened. The way older sisters do when they are trying to understand not just the words being said, but the shape of the story underneath them. And the more she listened, the more something in her chest began to feel uneasy. Not because Naomi was lying. She wasn't lying. Every single thing she said had happened exactly as she described it. But there is a particular kind of truth that is 100% accurate and still somehow incomplete. Diana had known Franklin for 5 years. She had watched him at family dinners, had seen him at birthday parties and holiday gatherings, and the occasional Sunday afternoon when the whole family crowded into someone's living room and ate too much and talked too loudly. She had watched him with Naomi, the way he tracked her across a room without being obvious about it, the way he noticed when her glass was empty before she did, the way he laughed at her jokes, even the ones that were not funny. That was not the behavior of a man who did not care. So Diana sat with her tea going cold in her hands, and she turned the story over in her mind the way you turn a coin over to check if both sides match. And somewhere between Naomi's third retelling of the laundry incident and her second declaration that she was calling a lawyer, Diana asked the question that would eventually change everything. "Naomi," she said, keeping her voice even and soft, "when you were lying there sick, did you ask him? Did you actually say, 'Franklin, I need help with the laundry'?" Naomi looked at her like she had said something deeply unreasonable. "I shouldn't have to ask," she said. "He should just know." Diana nodded slowly. She did not argue. She did not push. She simply set her cup down, looked at her sister's certain, exhausted face, and quietly began to understand something that Naomi was not yet ready to hear. The truth about Naomi was that she was exceptional at most things she turned her attention to. This was not ego, it was simply fact. She had been the organized one since childhood, the one who color-coded her school notes and remembered everyone's birthdays and could walk into a room and immediately see 3 things that needed rearranging. She had grown up in a household where her mother ran things with quiet, total authority, where the right way to fold a towel was a non-negotiable matter of household pride, where cooking was a craft to be taken seriously, and where the phrase, "if you want something done right, do it yourself," was not a complaint but a life philosophy. Naomi had inherited every bit of it. She was not a bad person. That is important to understand. She was not mean-spirited or calculating or consciously cruel. She was a woman who had very clear standards, who had spent her entire life being competent, and who found it genuinely, physically difficult to watch something be done incorrectly without intervening. And when she married Franklin, she brought all of that with her. Every standard, every system, every invisible rule, and she expected love to somehow translate all of it for him without her having to say a word. The laundry incident in year 1 had felt, to Naomi, like a reasonable correction. The silk blouse was ruined. She had told him before. He should have remembered. Simple. What she did not see, what she could not see from inside her own certainty, was what that correction looked like from where Franklin was standing. He had done the laundry unprompted. He had tried to contribute. And the result was a detailed breakdown of everything he had done wrong, delivered in a tone that left no room for good intentions. He tried again 3 weeks later. Another correction. He tried with cooking. Another correction. He tried with cleaning, with grocery shopping, with how he loaded the dishwasher, with which sponge was for the dishes and which was for the counters. And each time, the feedback came quickly and completely, with the full force of Naomi's certainty behind it. Now, here is the thing about human beings. And this is the part that is almost too uncomfortable to say out loud, because it requires all of us to look at ourselves honestly. We are adaptive creatures. We learn. We adjust. We read the room, and then we adjust to the room, and eventually we stop doing the things that consistently result in pain. Franklin was not weak. He was not spineless. He was intelligent and attentive and deeply in love with his wife. But he was also a man who had spent 5 years receiving a consistent message, delivered through 100 small corrections, that said, "Your help is not help. Your way is the wrong way. Stand back." So he had stood back, not out of laziness, not out of cruelty, out of the very same love that had made him try in the first place. Except now that love had learned to express itself through absence rather than action, because action had consistently been the wrong answer. It is one of the quietest tragedies in long-term relationships. The way one person's need for control can slowly, invisibly, teach the other person to disappear. Nobody announces it. Nobody plans it. It happens the way erosion happens, one small correction at a time, until the landscape has completely changed and nobody can quite remember what it used to look like. Diana did not tell Naomi any of this that morning. She was smart enough to know that the morning after a decision is not the moment for full truth. She helped Naomi change into fresh clothes. She brought her soup that she actually ate. She sat with her until the fever broke slightly and Naomi's eyes grew heavy, and she drifted into the kind of exhausted afternoon sleep that pregnant women fall into suddenly and completely. Then Diana sat in the kitchen, called their cousin Priscilla, who was a family counselor and who had the useful ability to listen to both sides of anything without losing her mind, and said 4 words. "I need your help." Meanwhile, Franklin was at work, completely unaware that his marriage had been pronounced dead the night before over a load of laundry. He sat at his desk and answered emails and approved shipping manifests and ate a sandwich at lunch and thought, with genuine tenderness, about his wife lying at home with her fever and their baby growing steadily inside her. He had texted her that morning. "How are you feeling? Do you need anything? I can leave early if you need me," and had received no reply, which he told himself meant she was sleeping, because that was the most hopeful interpretation available to him. He did not know that she had read the text and set the phone face down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. He did not know that her sister was in their kitchen. He did not know that somewhere in his wife's mind, the verdict was already written. He spent his lunch break looking up pregnancy-safe soups, and whether ginger helped with body aches, and whether the brand of prenatal vitamins they had been using was the right one. He made a note to stop at the pharmacy on the way home. He thought about whether she would want company tonight or whether she would prefer he kept things quiet, and he landed, based on 5 years of careful observation, on the side of quiet. Space. Peace. He was, in every way he knew how to be, trying to love her correctly. The problem was that correctly had been defined for him so thoroughly and so completely that he had no idea the definition had just changed. There is a particular kind of loneliness that lives inside a marriage where communication has slowly stopped working. Not because 2 people stopped caring, but because the language between them got broken somewhere along the way, and neither of them noticed until they were standing on opposite sides of a wall too high to see over. Naomi felt it as abandonment. Franklin felt it as caution. And both of them, in their own way, were right. Both of them were living inside the same marriage and experiencing something completely different, the way 2 people can stand in the same room and feel entirely different temperatures. The divorce papers Naomi requested would arrive in Franklin's hands 10 days later. He would stand in the hallway of their apartment holding the envelope, and the world would go very quiet around him, and he would read his name on the outside of it 3 times before he could make himself open it. And then he would sit down on the floor, not a chair, the actual floor, because his legs simply stopped cooperating. But that was 10 days away. For now, he finished his sandwich. He sent his wife another text. He got back to work. And in their apartment across the city, Naomi slept. And between them, in the silence, 5 years of small uncrossed distances sat waiting to be finally counted. The divorce papers were filed on a Thursday. Naomi had sat across from a soft-spoken attorney named Mr. Osei, in an office that smelled like printer ink and cold coffee, and she had answered every question with the calm precision of a woman who had made up her mind so completely that there was no longer any weather inside her, just stillness and the quiet hum of certainty. Franklin was served on a Monday. Diana found out on a Tuesday when Franklin called her, not to complain, not to beg, but simply because he had nobody else to call who was close enough to both of them to make sense of what had just happened. His voice on the phone was the kind of quiet that is worse than crying. It was the quiet of a person who has been hit so hard they haven't yet figured out how to make sound. "I don't understand," he said. "Just that. 3 words repeated twice because 3 words were all he had. Diana hung up the phone and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. Then she called Priscilla. Priscilla Addo was 41 years old, had a master's degree in family therapy, and had spent 15 years listening to people explain why their relationships had collapsed. She had heard every version of every story. She had sat across from people who were absolutely certain they were right, and she had learned slowly and with great patience that certainty is not the same as truth. Certainty is just the loudest feeling in the room. She had already heard Diana's version of the situation. Now she asked to hear Naomi's. They met at Priscilla's home office on a Wednesday afternoon. A warm room with 2 comfortable chairs and a small lamp that cast everything in amber light. Naomi came because Diana had asked her to come, and because she was 6 months pregnant and emotionally exhausted, and because some part of her, a part she had not given permission to speak yet, was tired of carrying the weight of her own story alone. She told it well. She always told things well. Priscilla listened without interrupting. She nodded. She let every word land and settle. And when Naomi finished, when she reached the end of the laundry, the dinner, the silence, the decision, Priscilla was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question. Not aggressively. Not with any edge of accusation. She asked it the way a good doctor asks the question they already know the answer to. Carefully, gently, with one eye on the door in case the patient needs to run. Naomi, she said, that night, when you were sick, when you needed help, did you tell Franklin what you needed? Did you say the words out loud? And Naomi, just as she had said to Diana, lifted her chin slightly and said, I shouldn't have to. He should just know. Priscilla nodded again. And then she said something that nobody had said to Naomi in 5 years of marriage, or perhaps in her entire adult life. She said it quietly, without drama, the way you say something when you genuinely want it to land rather than wound. Can I share something with you? And I need you to really hear it, not to defend yourself, just to hear it. Naomi said yes. She would later say that the yes surprised even her. The idea that love means never having to ask, Priscilla said, is one of the most quietly destructive beliefs in relationships. It sounds romantic. It feels like the highest standard of knowing someone. But what it actually does, in practice, in real life, in real marriages, is set your partner up to fail a test they don't even know they're taking. Naomi opened her mouth. Priscilla held up one gentle hand. I'm not finished. I want to ask you something else, and I want you to think about it honestly before you answer. She paused. In the last 5 years, when Franklin tried to help with laundry, what happened? A beat of silence. He ruined things, Naomi said. He didn't check labels. He mixed colors. And when you told him that, I corrected him. Because he was doing it wrong. Okay. And when he tried to cook? Naomi shifted slightly in her chair. He doesn't season properly. He rushes. The kitchen was always a mess after. And you told him? Yes. Every time. Yes. Priscilla let the silence sit for a moment. Not uncomfortably. Just long enough for the shape of what had been said to become visible. Naomi, she said softly. Do you understand what you taught him? That was the moment. Not a dramatic moment. No music swelled, no lightning struck, no voice came down from the ceiling. It was simply a question, asked in a warm room by a calm woman, and it landed somewhere deep in Naomi's chest where certainty had been living, unchallenged, for years. Do you understand what you taught him? She did not answer right away. She looked at her hands, at the slight swelling in her fingers that pregnancy had brought, at her wedding ring that she had not yet removed, at the small, unconscious way her palm had moved to rest against her stomach the way it always did when she needed steadying. Priscilla did not rush her. I taught him. Naomi started. Stopped. Started again. I taught him how I like things done. You taught him, Priscilla said gently, that his help was unwelcome, that his instincts were wrong, that the safest thing he could do in your home was wait for instructions. She paused. And then, on the one night you desperately needed him to act without instructions, you graded him on it. And he failed. But Naomi, he was only doing exactly what 5 years of marriage had taught him to do. The room was very quiet. Outside, a car passed. A bird called once and went silent. The lamp hummed its amber light. Naomi sat with the words moving through her like something she had swallowed and could not get back. Because the terrible thing about a truth that fits is that it fits even when you do not want it to. It slides into the gaps of your understanding and fills them perfectly, and no amount of resistance changes the shape of it. She thought about the laundry. About all the times she had stood in the doorway of the laundry room, watching Franklin sort clothes, waiting for the mistake she already knew was coming before he had even made it. She thought about the cooking, the way she would position herself at the counter while he cooked, offering suggestions in a tone that she had always framed to herself as helpful but which, sitting here now, she could suddenly hear from the other side of. She thought about the dishwasher, the sponges, the grocery lists she rewrote after he went shopping because he never got exactly the right brand, the dinners she subtly redid after he tried to cook them. She had spent 5 years perfecting a system. And the system had one fatal flaw. It worked only as long as she was standing and healthy and in control. The moment she needed to step back, the moment of fever and a pregnancy and sheer exhaustion required her to lie down and trust someone else, the system broke completely. Because she had never built trust into it. She had only built compliance. She had trained a partner, not cultivated one. And she had called the training a marriage. "I love him," she said. The words came out before she decided to say them. From somewhere below the anger, below the certainty, below the story she had been telling herself and everyone else for the past 2 weeks. Priscilla's expression did not change, but something in her eyes warmed. "I know," she said. "I love him and I filed for divorce over laundry." Naomi's voice cracked on the last word. Just slightly, just once, but enough. Enough to let the truth out. Enough for the whole constructed certainty of the past 2 weeks to shiver at its foundations. "It wasn't really about the laundry," Priscilla said. "It was about feeling unseen. Feeling like he didn't care. And those feelings were real, Naomi. I want you to know that. Your pain was real. But the story you built around it, the meaning you gave to what he did, that part deserves a second look." Naomi nodded slowly. She looked at the wall. She looked at her hands again. "He doesn't even know," she said quietly. "He has no idea why this is really happening. He doesn't know that I spent 5 years making him afraid to help me, and then punished him for being afraid." "No," Priscilla agreed. "He doesn't know that. But the question is, what are you going to do with what you know now?" She drove home in silence that evening, both hands on the wheel, the city moving past her windows in its usual rush of light and noise, indifferent to the earthquake happening quietly inside one woman's understanding of herself. She did not have an answer yet. But for the first time in 2 weeks, the certainty was gone. And in its place was something far more uncomfortable, far more honest, and, if she was brave enough, far more useful. She pulled into the parking garage of their apartment building and sat in the car for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. And she called Franklin. Franklin picked up on the second ring. He always picked up on the second ring. Even now. Even after the envelope. Even after 10 days of silence, so complete it had its own weight and texture. Even after sleeping in a rented room at his colleague's place, because going back to the apartment felt like walking into a wound. He picked up on the second ring because, and this was the part that would break Naomi's heart cleanly in two when she understood it fully. He had been waiting for her to call since the moment he was served. Not to argue. Not to plead. Just because it was her. And it was still her number. And he was still Franklin. "Naomi." His voice was careful. Steady. The voice of a man who had rehearsed composure because the alternative was falling apart entirely, and falling apart entirely was a luxury he had never quite allowed himself. "Hi," she said. One word. But the way she said it, soft, stripped of its usual certainty, carrying something unguarded that he had not heard in a very long time, told him more than a paragraph could have. He waited. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Not through lawyers. Not through Diana. Just can we talk? In person." A pause. Not long. 3 seconds, maybe 4. But inside those 3 seconds, Franklin lived through something complicated. Hope and caution arriving at exactly the same moment, jostling each other in a doorway neither was willing to yield. "Yes," he said. "Tell me when." They met at the apartment on a Friday evening. Franklin arrived first. He let himself in with his key, still had his key, had not been asked to return it, had not offered, and stood in the hallway of the home he had lived in for 4 years and felt like a guest in his own memory. Everything was exactly as he had left it. The coat hooks by the door. The small plant Naomi kept on the windowsill that she talked to when she thought nobody was listening. The photograph on the wall from their 2nd anniversary. A weekend trip to the coast, both of them laughing at something the camera had not caught, the kind of genuine laughing that cannot be performed. He stood in front of that photograph for a moment. Then he went to the kitchen and made tea, because it was the only useful thing he could think to do. Naomi arrived 20 minutes later. She came through the door slowly, the way a person enters a space they are not sure still belongs to them, and stopped when she saw him standing in the kitchen doorway holding 2 mugs. She looked at him. He looked at her. Her stomach was rounder than when he had last seen her up close. The baby visibly present now in a way that made something in his chest tighten, with a love so large it had nowhere to go. "You made tea," she said. "I checked what kind," he said. "The ginger one. You've been drinking ginger tea since the 2nd month. I know because I noticed, and I didn't say anything, because last time I mentioned your tea you said I was monitoring you." Naomi stood very still. "I remember that," she said quietly. "I know you do." He set 1 mug on the counter within her reach and kept the other in his hands. "Come sit down, Naomi." They sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Franklin had eaten alone the night of the fever. The same table where their ordinary life had been conducted across 5 years of morning coffees and rushed breakfasts and occasional dinner arguments and the small, accumulated debris of 2 people sharing space. For a while neither of them spoke. They drank their tea. Then Naomi set her mug down and looked at him. Really looked at him. The way she had not allowed herself to look at him since the night she had made her decision, because looking at Franklin directly had always made it harder to be certain of anything. "I went to see Priscilla," she said. Something shifted in his expression. "Diana's cousin? The counselor?" "Yes." "Okay." He waited. "She asked me something." Naomi's hands wrapped around her mug. "She asked me if I had asked you for help that night. If I had said the actual words." Franklin was quiet. "And I told her I shouldn't have to ask. That you should just know." She paused. The words tasted different now than they had in Priscilla's office. Different than they had in the 2 weeks she had been building her case. They tasted like something that had seemed reasonable in the dark, but could not survive the light. "And then she asked me what I had taught you. Over 5 years. What I had actually taught you about helping me." The kitchen was very still. Franklin set his mug down slowly. He looked at the table. At the grain of the wood. At his own hands. "Naomi," he started. "Let me finish," she said. Not sharply. Gently. "Please. Because if I stop I don't know if I'll be able to start again." She took a breath. "I have been going over it. Everything. The laundry, all the times I corrected you, all the times I redid what you did, all the times I stood there watching and waiting for you to get it wrong. The cooking. The cleaning. All of it. And I keep arriving at the same place no matter how many times I go through it." Her voice dropped. "I trained you. I trained you to stay out of my way, and then I punished you for staying out of my way. And I called that a failing marriage." Franklin did not speak immediately. When he did, his voice was measured and honest in the way that only people who have been sitting alone with a truth for a long time can manage. "I knew something was wrong," he said. "I just didn't know what to do about it. Every time I tried, every time I thought, okay, today I'll do the laundry, today I'll cook dinner, today I'll just step up, something in me would remember the last time. And I'd stop. And I'd tell myself I was giving you space. I told myself it was respect." He looked up at her. "But that's not what it was, is it?" "No," she said. "It was fear." "Yes." He nodded. "Once." The nod of a man receiving a difficult confirmation of something he had long suspected about himself. "I should have said something," he said. "I should have told you that I felt like I couldn't do anything right. That I was scared to try. I kept waiting for the right moment, and the right moment never came, and I kept shrinking. And I let myself shrink because it was easier than another argument." He exhaled. "That's on me too, Naomi. I'm not standing here without fault. I should have talked to you." This was the moment neither of them had managed in 5 years. Not because they were bad at love, but because love without communication is like a house without doors. It can look perfect from the outside and be impossible to actually live in. They had built something beautiful, and then sealed every entrance without quite realizing what they were doing, and then stood on opposite sides of the wall wondering why they felt so alone. Naomi reached across the table. She did not take his hand. Not yet, not quite, but she rested her fingers near his. Close enough to feel the warmth of him. Close enough to remember that this was the person she had chosen. The person whose laugh she knew in all its variations, whose sleepy voice in the morning she had heard 1,000 times, who had held her hair back when the first trimester nausea was cruel, who had driven 40 minutes at midnight to get her the specific brand of mango juice she had craved in week 14, because she had mentioned it once, casually, and he had remembered. He had always been paying attention. She had just been too certain to notice. "I'm not saying everything is fixed," she said. I know it's not. I know I have things to work on that I don't even fully understand yet. And I know you do too. She looked at him. But I don't want to do this. I don't want a divorce over laundry. I don't want our daughter to grow up asking why her parents couldn't find their way back to each other. Franklin looked up. Daughter. Naomi blinked. Then, despite everything, despite the weight and the grief and the work still ahead of them, she laughed. A small laugh, surprised out of her, genuine and warm. I found out last week. I was going to tell you, and then everything. A daughter, he said. And the way he said it, quietly, with his whole face, with something that broke through every layer of caution and hurt and careful composure, was the most unguarded she had seen him in years. He pressed his hand over hers. She turned her palm up and held it. They did not reconcile in a night. That is not how real things work, and this was a real thing. They went to counseling, together with Priscilla, every Thursday evening for 4 months. Franklin learned to speak up when he felt erased. Naomi learned, slowly, imperfectly, with considerable resistance and then gradual acceptance, to ask for what she needed instead of building silent tests around the assumption that love should already know. She learned that asking is not weakness, that saying I need help is not an admission of failure, but an act of trust, that the people who love us are not psychics, and that expecting them to be is not a romantic standard. It is a trap. Franklin learned that shrinking is not the same as respecting, that disappearing into compliance to avoid conflict is not peace. It is a slow erasure of everything that makes partnership real. They were not perfect. They would never be perfect. But they were honest. For the first time in a long time, they were genuinely, uncomfortably, productively honest. Their daughter was born on a Thursday morning in early February. 6 pounds, 11 ounces, a full head of dark hair, and a voice that made her opinions immediately and thoroughly known. Franklin was in the room. He held Naomi's hand through every hour of it. At one point she told him he was squeezing too hard, and he immediately apologized and loosened his grip, and she immediately said no, keep holding it, and he did, and they both recognized, in the middle of all that pain and exhaustion, that this was them learning in real time, asking, adjusting, communicating, staying. They named her Maya. Maya, who would grow up in a home where her parents argued sometimes and repaired always, where her father cooked on Sundays and her mother let him, really let him, even when the seasoning was slightly off. Where her parents said, I need, and can you help, and I was wrong out loud, like people who had learned the hard way that silence is not peace and certainty is not wisdom. And Naomi, brilliant, capable, fiercely competent Naomi, who had spent 5 years being right about nearly everything and nearly lost the best thing in her life because of it, learned the most important lesson of her life not from a textbook or a plan or a perfectly executed system. She learned it from a laundry basket, from a fever, from a quiet man washing only his own clothes because she had spent 5 years teaching him that was the safest thing to do. She learned that being right is not the same as being connected. And she learned it just in time. Yellowheart, a word before you go. Love is not a mind-reading competition. The people who love us are human. They are trying, often in the dark, with the information we've given them. If you've spent time teaching someone to stay back, you cannot punish them for staying back. Speak up. Ask clearly. Love out loud. Because the most dangerous silence in a relationship is not the one after an argument. It is the one where you expect someone to know what you never said. You deserve to be understood. But understanding starts with being willing to be known. If this story moved you, made you think, or made you see your own relationships a little differently, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell us in the comments. What did you learn from Naomi and Franklin's story? We read every single one. See you in the next one.